Going live.
It's live!
Yes.
It's alive! Okay, Katya is also here.
Yeah.
It's live!
Perfect.
It's alive!
Yeah.
It's live!
Okay, perfect. So we're gonna give it another minute, and then we're gonna start.
Hey, do you think it's better if it's probably better if I'm only on the Hangouts, right?
What did you say?
Hey, do you think it's probably better if I'm only on the Hangouts, not also on the YouTube, because otherwise I get two audios and it's very annoying.
Okay, definitely one of us has to mute.
It's probably better if I'm only on the Hangouts. Can you repeat that, please?
Okay, I figured it out. I had the recording on sound also. So Andre, if you can also mute your microphone and your webinar on YouTube, then we can start in.
Sure.
Give it one extra minute.
I was just thinking about, should I be looking at this stream on YouTube as well?
So if you will be keeping an eye on the stream and the comments that are coming in.
Ah, good point. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Okay, so I think if everything is working and now we have 4 viewers, maybe more of them will join in, but I think otherwise we can start. Andre, are you ready?
Ready?
Okay, perfect. So if something goes wrong with my screen, please let me know because I won't be seeing it because I'm gonna go to full screen mode. Do you have the concept note on? The PowerPoint is visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect.
No, the whole screen is visible.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So hi everyone who is online. We don't know who exactly is, but we'll find out soon. Welcome to the Capacity Building Strategy Concept Note webinar. My name is Stijntje. I'm the Liaison Officer for Medical Education Issues, and we have Andre online, who is the RA for Capacity Building, but most importantly, the Vice President for Capacity Building elect, who will be taking charge of this next year. And the idea of this webinar is for us very briefly go through what the concept note is that we send to the NMO server, and then majorly for your input, discussion, feedback, questions, and other things, because we know for sure that what we have now is definitely not perfect. And as you may have seen in the email on the NMO server, the idea is that based on the feedback that you give now, we will send a new concept note in 4 days to the NMO server, and that would be what would be discussed in the August meeting. So welcome everyone. If you see the screen on the YouTube channel, you'll also see the comment box below it. And if you have comments popping in into your head, feel free to write them down there. And in the end, I will go briefly through the presentation, and Andre will be going through the questions and trying to answer them as they're very much relevant for next year's term. So, and we'll try to keep it short. If you haven't seen it yet, the link is also on the NMO server, but you can also find the link to the concept note that was shared with you here. So if you haven't seen it yet, feel free to quickly type it in. I'm going to move to the next slide, but if you're looking for it, it's also on the NMO server. Small working group members, today we're missing Diogo, Gustavo, and Hannah, but we're here, and we're going to go try to get you through this presentation. So where did this come from? Well, you can maybe you remember that it was one of the Tom 4 outcomes. It was one of the things that we were discussing. And also with the creation of the new position of the Vice President for Capacity Building. Why do we need this change? Why is this something we have to work on? Well, actually, capacity building is sort of the backbone of everything that we do in IFMSA. It's not just the TNTs that are happening and the trainers that are giving trainings, but it's actually everything that we do, from the work within the standing committees to capacity building of the NMOs to mostly everything. And we have the feeling that throughout the Federation, a lot of the times we're working in silos. So everyone is doing their own thing. People are working within their NMO or within a standing committee, but it's not that much interlinked. And for example, you can see SCORP hosting training on advocacy, while SCOF is doing exactly the same, but in their own way. So we felt that there needs to be a higher level of interconnection of our work, also to help us focus more, to prioritize, and to create strategies, as well as to assess how well are we actually doing. And that's where this concept note came from. Capacity building, like I said, it's almost everything that we do within IFMSA. It can be physical events, for example, workshop, trainings, even external meetings. People that we send to delegations to an external meeting will also be building their capacity. It's the exchanges that build capacity of medical students worldwide in a medical education sense. It's online events, some of the standing committees that are hosting online campaigns to raise awareness about certain topics with the members. It's resources, toolkits. It's basically almost everything. So what are we proposing now? I think the major outcome of the discussions that we have had, and which is also the major thing that we need your feedback on, whether you think that is or is not a good idea, is setting priorities. Why? Because there's unlimited amount of things that we can work on, whether it's topics, whether it's types of capacity building, whether it's certain skills that we want. And basically within this group, and you'll see also in the outcomes of the other small working groups, for example, external representation, is that we're proposing that IFMSA would need to try to prioritize more what we do to also increase our impact. And other than that, what we're trying to propose is not only related to capacity building, it's based on the concept that we're expecting the next IFMSA strategic plan, and the framework of that is already addressing priorities for the Federation, which we'll hopefully get back to in a few seconds. What is the timeline? As you know, we already informed the NMOs about this proposal and it was shared with you. Now we're in the online meeting. The idea is that we will hear what you guys have to propose, have to say, and create a new draft based on what you're actually suggesting, and that the final proposal will be on the table in the August meeting, and that hopefully we can vote whether or not this is a sort of way on how we want to move forward for the upcoming year. As I said, it's the concept note. So what this proposal is, it's not the actual capacity building strategy, which would be we're going to deliver X and X workshops in this area, and we need to focus on topic X, Y, and Z. We believe that we're not yet in the stage that IFMSA knows exactly what it wants to do in the areas where it needs to build capacity. So this would be something that would happen in the next year. So what we're discussing now is the concept based on which the actual capacity building strategy would be built. Like we said, the idea is based on different priorities. So that IFMSA has priorities in which it wants to support its NMOs. So what are the needs of NMOs? For example, 3 NMOs say, well, what we really need to survive, so it's not related to the IFMSA's work, is we need to be better in fundraising. We need to be better in handover or some other areas. This is something that really directly affects the NMOs, and it's still something that we think is important that IFMSA offers. So this would be something that comes from the NMOs, a proposal based on the NMO's needs, whether it's from the NMO reports, whether it's through a call for input, whether it's through voting in the General Assembly. Then there's also specific priorities that IFMSA has in themes, which is usually the standing committees. Not all NMOs have standing committees, so it could be other areas. That would, according to us, mostly come from, for example, the standing committee directors that would think they usually send a call for input every year. And they also have discussions during the General Assemblies. What are the different areas where we really believe that IFMSA needs to grow in or take action in? What are globally the most important? Well, most important is very hard to say, but what are focus areas that IFMSA can really have an impact in and should be working on? And then there's capacity building, or there's the work of the IFMSA in general, the work that IFMSA does. For example, the management level, the TO. How can we actually change the efficiency and the transparency of the IFMSA leadership? So the idea is we have all of these priorities that we decided through our strategic plan, which we don't have yet. Well, we have one, but this is the one we're talking about from 2017-2020. We are expecting that within this strategic plan, there are priorities for the themes, for the NMOs, and for IFMSA's general leadership. And based on the concept that we have those priorities, which is not selecting the priorities is not the focus of this presentation, but based on the fact that we would have priorities, which here's a short explanation, would be part of the strategic plan, which is not what we're proposing now. Based on that, we have that, which will be up to the new executive board to move forward in. How do we actually build a capacity building strategy if we already have these priorities? How does that fit in? So we're proposing to zoom in. Let's say we're taking the example of the standing committee themes. They all have their own priorities. For example, as you see here, the example priority is refugees. We believe we did a needs assessment, and as an example, IFMSA said that we really need to have an impact in refugees worldwide because this is a pressing issue, because this is something that is related to medical students. It's something where IFMSA can have an impact. So let's say IFMSA chose refugees as one of the priorities. But let's say we didn't only look at refugees. So for example, it would not only be SCORP developing its own capacity building strategy on how we can tackle refugee health. But at the same time, in SCOF, they are working on a strategy on how to have an impact on NCDs, and in SCOME on social accountability in medical schools, etc. Usually at the moment, every standing committee would be developing its own capacity building strategy. For example, the SCORP director says, well, I need 4 workshops on this area, I need a campaign on this, etc. The idea behind this concept note would be that still every area would do that. So those standing committees would be doing it, as well as for the NMOs. For NMOs, it would be, for example, the African region saying that all of our NMOs really want to work on fundraising, or the Asia Pacific region that says we really want to work on external representation. All of these different areas create their own sort of needs assessment. Where do we need to grow in? Well, if we want to improve refugee health, we need and fundraising and capacity building, and we will need experts in the field and area, etc. The idea behind the capacity building strategy is that it takes the blocks that are created by the responsible people on the left side and looks over everything and tries to find out common areas. For example, well, 4 out of the 6 standing committees expressed an extreme need to work on changing policies because they all think that that is essential for them to reach their goals. So the Vice President for Capacity Building will try to find the common areas out of both what NMOs need, what the thematic areas need, and what the IFMSA leadership needs, and it tries to create an overall strategy. Okay, if we really want to think that for most of the areas where we do work in IFMSA, they all want to reach X, Y, and Z, then those have to be our priorities for this year for capacity building. So when we're selecting the pre-GAs, we're going to make sure that there is at least something present on that external representation workshop. Or there's at least something in terms of fundraising workshops within the General Assemblies. Or there can be, we can find out that we do not have certain expertise within IFMC. For example, what if almost all of them propose that we really need to learn how to assess impact, but we don't have the trainers? That is the moment when the vice president for capacity building can decide, well, this is something that is really important, but what we don't have, this is what we're going to invest in to get external expertise. So we're going to hire someone to deliver that to us. So the idea is that different blocks of strategies that are all being created every year by every different person, with all of them their own expertise and their own background, and it goes into a general strategy on how we can actually fulfill the needs that we have throughout IFMC. How does it work? The first page it's just about, well, IFMC first needs to know where does it want to have an impact, so it needs assessment on what we want to change. This is related to IFMC strategy. So this is something that the EB-elects will be taking the lead on next year for 2017-2020. Keeping in mind, is this really relevant? Is it useful for us to work on? Do we have the capacity to do it? Next, we're going to have, if we have all of those different blocks that already have these priorities, we're going to have need a resource analysis. So do we already have what we need? Do we have human resources? Do we have materials? Do we have finances? If we don't have it, can we get it somewhere else? Then creating a plan of action, which is a collaboration between the vice president for capacity building with the input of the standing committee directors, of the regional directors who would be speaking on behalf of their region, the NMOs, trying to create a plan of action for the year. Okay, what do we need to work on? Which manuals do we need? Which toolkits could we need? For example, if both SCOF and SCORP and SCOMI say we need to work on advocacy, it wouldn't make sense for all of them to create a whole manual. What if we have one general one? That's just really good. And we bring people together to actually work on it. If we need to train experienced trainers in a specific field, why not create one really good workshop and have those people go back to those fields, their regions or their standing committees? Evaluation and follow-up, which is something so far we've proven not to be very good experts in. About the process, so was what we had in mind really carried out correctly, and impact, did we reach the goal that we want to reach? And in the end, also reporting back on how did we actually go through this process and what is the future steps. Outside of all of this, there is one more thing that, or well, probably multiple things, but at least one more thing that this strategy needs to look at, which is also the structure of the training system, which was in the past always coordinated by the training support division, to take a look at how do we actually train our trainers? How do we increase the quality of our workshops? How do we follow up with trainers that we already have in all of these fields? These people that are going to be delivering that plan of action, how can we go one level up and actually monitor how well they are delivering this capacity building strategy that we're talking about, and how much impact do we actually have? And then this would all be applicable for next year. So I tried to very briefly go through this presentation. I'm sorry for holding such a long monologue. The idea is that we would really like to have your comments, feedback, hear that we're completely out of our minds, or whether we're on the right track, because this will be very important for next year. And this is why I'm going to give the floor to Andre, who is going to take a look if you ever already submitted questions or suggestions, and he's going to try to answer them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sven. Yeah, like you said, we'll be taking questions right now. Please post them in the comment box of the YouTube video, and we'll see what we can clarify. All right, so we already have two comments. One is from Helene. Great initiative and thanks for hosting the webinar. In the concept note, you are stating how to select priorities. But now, are you saying that these priorities could be chosen as a part of development of the new strategy for the IFMSA? Could you explain which one it is? Okay, so like Stancha mentioned earlier, this concept note does not tackle how we get these priorities. But that doesn't mean that we weren't discussing this in our small working group. This is definitely one of the parts of the strategy that is the most important one, because we want all of the NMOs to provide equal input and get, to reach the high level of NMO involvement in this, so that the NMOs get well represented in the priorities that we will decide for the IFMSA. It might as well be there might be different processes going on regarding choosing the priorities, and that is in relevance to what part of the strategy we're talking about. So one part of it, for example, is the NMOs part, which is now divided into regions. Now you might remember the priority selection we had, for example, for the European region was done that we had a few rounds of consultation. We had that in the regional sessions of the GA. We had it in the EURIGME. We did that in the email, and that's how we chose the priorities in order to make a strategy at the end. One proposal is that for the thematic part, which is more connected to the standing committees, that the standing committee directors would, for example, give a call for input and then get the priorities from there. How to get the priorities for the management of the IFMSA will probably also include the NMOs and the TO. So that would be a few examples of how to gather these priorities, although we are very, very susceptible to any kind of comments or feedback regarding this. What we would like definitely also as a EB elect is to get as many NMOs involved into this process, because that's the only way that the NMOs can also feel ownership over the strategic plan that we might develop at the end. Okay, I hope this answers it, and if it doesn't, you can just post another comment there. And then from Denmark, we got a question, or a comment, that I fear that the priorities for capacity building NMO support will be very different among the regions. So how will you define priorities relevant to all regions? I'm not sure that the goal is to find priorities for all of the regions. I think in step one, it's more important that every region gets represented as well as possible for whatever needs they have or whatever needs the NMOs in the regions have. And then in the next step, we see if there is any interconnection between them. Because if we want to generalize again, we might come out with a proposal that is very general, very unspecific, and it's not going to do much for anyone. So we will kind of try to adapt the plan towards the needs, not the needs toward the plan. So if they'll be different, of course, our regions have different needs, but I'm pretty sure, talking also from experience, that some of the needs will be similar. For example, a lot of NMOs struggle with financial issues, and that is not only limited to one region. So I'm pretty sure we'll find points that are there together. And we have Steinche that wants to comment or add something, so I'll let her speak.
Perfect. It's a very interesting question. It's also, I think I also didn't really emphasize it that much, but the idea is that the regional directors will have a very important role in the right side of that scheme that I showed. It can also be that something is very relevant for one region or standing committee or area, but not at all for the other ones. That doesn't mean that that we don't have to work on it. For example, if we go to the standing committees again and the topic is refugees, then that might be nice for SCORP, but maybe the other standing committees don't want to build capacity in knowledge in that area. Then it would be maybe not part of the overall strategy, also of everything, but it doesn't mean that the VPCB won't be helping the relevant person. So in this case of your example, the regional director to still develop a strategy for the region or a plan of action for the region. For example, if there's region A that really is the only one that says that the most important area to work on is financial management, also because keeping in mind that the way that, for example, fundraising happens is very different from region to region. Europe has certain grants that don't exist in other regions. Africa has a lot of grants, but that work in a very different way. So each region has its own specific ways of dealing with things. And I think that's also why it's quite important that at the moment, maybe the regions and IFMSA capacity building work very separately. But what if the vice president for capacity building really has the oversight of what capacity building is being done in the regions, and what should be really done in the regions rather than general, because it's so different between the regions. So I think it's important to know that that the fact that there will be a general strategy doesn't mean that within the specific fields there will still be differences in what is being worked on.
Yeah, and there's also, I would just kind of like to echo what Steinche just said, maybe rephrase it a little bit, is that, and also what I said earlier, is that the first part will be every part of the big strategy. So the thematic teams, the standing committees, the regions, also the management of IFMSA will kind of have its own part of the plan, its own plan. But where the interconnection comes into play is where we will look for synergies between these plans. So we will not subject the plans itself, the original plans, in order to have one general one, but rather the other way around. So when we will find that two plans coincide, we will take advantage of that. But if there will be differences in the plans, we are not going to we're not going to try to erase them, because we do realize that different standing committees, different regions have different needs. So we'll also encourage that part, that every region, every NMO, or every standing committee will be able to develop as much as possible. I hope that answers to the comment or the question. And now we have another one, is that will the capacity building strategy be a part of the IFMSA strategic plan 2017-2020, or will it be voted upon as a separate strategy? The concept we are presenting right now, and the concept we've been discussing, and this is a big part, it's a very important and very big question, is what you just posed. And our idea is that yes, it will be a part of the IFMSA strategic plan 2017-2020, and the whole concept note is kind of describes the process that we'll go through in order to develop that strategic plan. The idea is to have, in the end, one document, one strategic plan that incorporates all the smaller ones, or the development of its parts, its building blocks, like the standing committees, the regions, or the NMOs, the IFMSA management leadership. And then in this plan, we also have, parts of it are, of course, connected to capacity building. Or rather, most of it will probably be connected to capacity building. Okay. Let's see. Are there any new comments, questions?
Maybe another question we had, and that we don't really, we couldn't really find the best answer to, is how many priorities do we want to end up with? Which is something we don't fully have an answer to be honest. Also because if you ask standing committees to select one priority, they will also say, but well, we're working in all of these different fields. And I think Helen, you also commented on the external representation strategy, where I think you said that some of the areas were quite broad because they didn't want to limit themselves in not working on the other ones, even though like we're saying from the beginning, having one thing as a focus area doesn't mean you can't work on the other things. But yeah, like for example, for regions, how many priorities do we want regions to select? I think in the end we suggested 3 for each region, but Andre, correct me if I'm wrong.
Right now, for the European region, we selected 5.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know if you guys, I think it's just Helen and Emily at the moment. Maybe some other people also. If you have thoughts on that, feel free to share them as well.
Yes, indeed. And now we have another question regarding collecting input from the NMOs, the national officer, by the official who would propose the theme priority, so the priority of the themes. And there's a really good point that was pointed out, is that what if there's not enough input on a certain theme? This is actually a question that, although it's very relevant, is a bit, maybe a bit premature at this point, because we haven't really decided whether it will be the TO who will be collecting the input. That was just one of the suggestions that we thought was a good one. But indeed, as was said before, we will strive towards having, you know, as many NMOs giving input on relevant, also not only for the NMO development or the management of the FMC, but also on the thematic part. So one solution to this could be to post the question not only in standing comedy servers, but also in NMO servers, and kind of nagging, probably nagging the national offices. But this is something that will be discussed a bit later when we decide upon whether it will really be the team of officials or the standing committee directors who will be receiving this sort of input. And I'm pretty sure that the NMOs will also be consulted, or will take the input from NMOs as to how this process should be conducted. And also, let's say if the standing committees directors will indeed be the ones taking the input, we'll also make sure that they collect enough input in order to make the sample representative.
Maybe an additional question from me for whoever might have an answer is, if we, for example, send an updated version of this concept note, are there areas that need to be added? For example, that you would want us to elaborate on with a suggestion? Or are there areas that you would want to change, that you think, well, this is really not the way that we should be moving forward to? Or are there confusing areas within the document? You can also email those as well, maybe if it's just about language. But yeah, what would you think would still be needed to add to this document, enable for us to have a productive and good discussion in August?
I guess we can wait for a few minutes to see if there'll be any more comments. Otherwise, as Tansha said, you can also send us an email. Maybe we can cue the elevator music.
If not, Andre, are there any other questions that would be relevant for you, since you will be the one having to deal with whatever the outcome of this concept note is, whether people want to head this way or another way? Would there still be information you would want from the NMOs before the GA already that would be helpful?
I think the most relevant one would be the one that you already said, is that just a general idea what people think about this concept, because it is something new. We don't want to, scare anyone, saying that it's a big change, but some might perceive it as such. There have also been a few questions regarding, how capacity building fits into this, and just seeing the concept note, and just maybe clarifying again that this is that what we are trying to agree on in the August meeting is just a way we will make a strategy. So it's not a strategy on its own. Maybe you could call it a strategy of a strategy. Yeah, and just the general call for input, or general feedback if you really think that this is something we should continue working on, or rather if you think this is a thing we shouldn't be working on and we should cease with it immediately, which hopefully is not the case. That's it basically. And for all of the specifics, we'll also be very happy to answer them either here, preferably before the GA, but if not, any other way, we can also answer them after or during the GA itself.
And I think we have some questions now here, as well as I think Diogo, who was the contact person for the small working group, also received some. So we'll at least try to make sure to collect the different questions and provide the answers and send them also on the NMO server after this webinar.
Yes, a very good point, very good initiative. I think after this webinar, it was planned anyway to revise it a little bit, the concept note, to take input from the webinar, and probably also from all of the questions and feedback that we've already received. And it was also presented in the timeline you presented before that there will be a document which we'll try to adopt in the GA. And of course, we will include all of the questions, all of the input we've received in that document. So the document that we have now as the draft is not the final one of the concept note.
Yeah, I think we haven't received any more questions so far. If there still are, please write them down now. Otherwise, feel free to approach us after the webinar, because we don't want to keep your time on a Sunday afternoon the full time and not longer than necessary. So feel free to either send specific comments for changes or questions that you would want us to answer to the NMO server. If you do it within the next 2 days, then we'll make sure to include it in our response to them. And in general, if there are not any other questions showing up, which I think there are not, thank you very much for joining us. We hope we weren't too boring to listen to, and yeah, we look forward to hearing your comments afterwards also.
Yes, thank you also from my side. Thank you, Stanche, for presenting it so well in the beginning. And yeah, like you said, we're looking forward to your comments very much, and to again present it in the GA.
Okay, brilliant. So I'll close up the live stream. Thank you all very much.
Right.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.